What's going on, everybody? Welcome into episode 149 of the MudWatch Sports Podcast on this Monday, March 23rd, 2026. I'm your host, Zach Malum. But before we get started, please subscribe below. Follow all of my social accounts. Let's start things off in the world of basketball and in the college game, as St. John's, the number 5 seed in the East region, have advanced to their first Sweet 16 since 1999. Let's look at the St. John's Red Storm's path to this Sweet 16 berth. It all started on Friday as they took on the Northern Iowa Panthers, the 12 seed in the East region, out in San Diego on Friday evening. And St. John's won this game by a big margin, 26-point win, a 79-53 win for the Johnnies. And it was led by their big man in Zuby Ejiofor, who had 14 points, 11 rebounds, a couple of assists, and 4 blocks on the evening. A phenomenal game for Zuby in just 28 minutes. He stepped up for the Red Storm, and Bryce Hopkins did the same. 34 minutes in the game, 13 points, 5 of 9 shooting, 2 3-pointers from beyond the arc, and 6 rebounds to go along with it. A great day for Bryce Hopkins as well, and Isaiah Sellers hit some threes. They really stepped up big time. The St. John's Red Storm did, and it really came down to the defensive side of the ball. They held Northern Iowa to just 53 points on the night. 39% from the field, 21% from beyond the arc. Northern Iowa had just 3 3-pointers in the game. That was completely the difference in the game after Northern Iowa in the Missouri Valley Conference tournament completely lit it up from beyond the arc. They were terrific in that tournament. They were not in this game, and give credit to St. John's 3-point defense for really stepping up. They only allowed the Panthers, who put up a lot of 3-pointers every game, to just shoot 14 3-pointers. That's it. That's all Northern Iowa was able to do, and St. John's took advantage of it. They hit 10 threes themselves on their own side, 10 of 29 from beyond the arc, 34%. And then you look at St. John's, 47% they shot from the field. The clear difference was on the defensive side of the ball. It was also in the rebounding battle. They completely dominated with that front line. St. John's did 45-29. They out-rebound the Panthers in this one. Just from start to finish, it looked like St. John's had complete control of the game, and they were able to do that on the defensive side of the ball. Great stuff by the Red Storm, and they move on to a very tough test, probably their toughest test of the season when you look at overall and the moment, and St. John's just looking to get over the hump. The pressure is on, and you have to go up against one of the greatest coaches in college basketball history. Bill Self takes his Kansas Jayhawks, the 4 seed in the East region, up against the 5 seed St. John's. Rick Pitino versus Bill Self, the second meeting between these coaches, and what a battle it was. St. John's wins it at the buzzer. Dylan Darling steps up and is the hero as St. John's moves on to the Sweet 16 with a 67-65 win over Kansas. And Dylan Darling, who completely struggled throughout the day, only played 18 minutes on the afternoon, and he gets the game-winning bucket to have just 2 points on the day, 1 of 5 shooting, 0 of 4 from beyond the arc, and he ends up getting the game winner as time expired. Just a phenomenal moment for this St. John's team. You knew in the end that it would come down to moments like this where somebody just had to step up. St. John's led this game by a large margin throughout. They had a nice 14-point cushion at one point during this game. They led by 12 with just a couple of minutes to go. It seemed 6 minutes to go is really a St. John's win. Just really ready, signed, sealed, delivered. And they end up giving up the lead. They never gave up the lead completely because they were tied at the end of it, but they end up getting the game-winning bucket when they needed it the most. They led for 93% of this game, and Kansas just had no answers. They were also turning the ball over plenty in this one. And really, that's the difference in the game. Of course, Dylan Darling had a moment. He stepped up and gets the game winner. But 16 turnovers for the Kansas Jayhawks, that's almost unheard of by a Bill Self team. 16 turnovers to just 8 for the Johnnies, and points off turnovers were a clear difference here. 18 points off turnovers for St. John's to just 7 for the Kansas Jayhawks. And of course, St. John's wanted to shoot the ball in this one from beyond the arc. That was the goal. Kansas is big on the inside. You have some tough defenders down there, Floyd Badunga, Bryson Tiller, two big men that are really, really tough. They also had Paul Mbaya, who came in off the bench, and it made it difficult for St. John's throughout the game. The strategy for Rick Pitino's team was to shoot the ball from beyond the arc and hopefully make a couple of them. They end up making 11 three-pointers in the game, but that was on 35 attempts from beyond the arc. That's clearly their most in a season so far this season, but they end up shooting just 31% from the three-point line. Kansas shot only 14 three-pointers, 5 of 14 from the three-point line they were, and 36%. They also shot 44% from the field to St. John's just 36 in this one. They out-rebounded St. John's as well, which is not an easy task. They end up getting the victory, though. St. John's just escapes and ends up in the Sweet 16, where a lot of people expected them to go in the end, get through Northern Iowa, and then eventually get through Kansas. Kansas had its struggles so far this season and throughout this season, just could not get some big wins down the stretch. They also had some bad losses throughout the year. They were dealing with some injury to Darren Peterson, their star man. It was just so much inconsistency from Kansas. One day they would play well, the other day they would not. And Kansas was not a good road team as well this year. Of course, that's not easy, and arguably the toughest conference in college basketball in the Big 12. But Kansas was not the level that they needed to be at, not at the level they needed to be at heading into this NCAA tournament, in my opinion. And they end up paying for it with a massive loss and a huge win for St. John's, 67-65. Dylan Darling will be remembered for a long time by the St. John's faithful. So all of a sudden, St. John's, you're looking at it and you go, wow, they got to get through Kansas. If they get through Kansas, probably got to get through Duke. And that's exactly what they have to do. They get a week's rest, but they have to go down to Washington, D.C. now. They're happy to do so, to take on the number 1 seeded Duke Blue Devils. This one taking place on Friday at 7:10. And it's going to be the Duke Blue Devils who come into this game as 6.5-point favorites, total sitting at 142.5. For starters, going to talk about this game on Friday's episode, going to preview it a little bit more. But this game comes down solely to shooting the basketball. If St. John's can hit three-pointers and can hit shots consistently, shoot well from the field, Duke's going to have to keep up. It's also because Duke is a phenomenal defensive team. St. John's also a very good defensive team. It's going to be a battle of two great coaches in Rick Pitino and John Shire, who have done a great job focusing on defense throughout this NCAA tournament and throughout this season in 2025-26. It's been a great year so far for St. John's, and now they get their biggest test by far. Bigger than all the championship games, the round of 32, whatever you want. They have to go up against the top team in the country in Duke, and Duke still has some guys a little bit questionable due to injury. Caleb Foster is still a chance to play, but still a long shot, it seems, right now on Monday, March 23rd. We'll see if things get better as the days go on. They got Patrick Gungba back into the starting lineup. The last game Duke did, and they came back and beat up on TCU in the end. Ended up winning that one by a large margin. It's not going to be an easy test for the Johnnies, and they have to really have their A game to knock off the number 1 team in the country. Can they do so? Yeah. They have to shoot the ball well, though. This is going to be a game that's probably in the 60s, almost pushing the 70s. St. John's is going to have to focus defensively. Duke will do the same. But if St. John's can hit shots, that's the difference in this one. It should be a phenomenal couple of days leading up to this game against the Duke Blue Devils, and we'll see what happens. We'll preview it on Friday's episode. St. John's biggest game of the year, number 5 in the East region, up against number 1 in Duke. This one's Friday at 7:10 p.m. Staying in the world of basketball, but shifting things to the association, as the New York Knicks have all of a sudden rattled off a 6-game winning streak. And that was after a tough stretch where the Knicks had lost 3 of their last 4 against some of the top teams in the NBA. Oklahoma City beat them on their home floor, and they ended up getting a tough win on the road at Denver, a complete blowout. But then they lose back-to-back games against the Lakers and the Clippers, and that was towards the beginning of the month. And since then, the Knicks have been perfect. Some may say that, of course, there's a little bit of luck involved for this Knicks team, including some games in this 6-game win streak where they have lost, where they've gone up against some teams who have lost some players due to injury, did not play in the game. But the Knicks end up squeaking over the line. They've also had games that they've clearly should have lost, and they end up rattling off a run or something, get some luck on their side, and they end up getting a victory in the end. That's happened in a couple of games, including the Golden State game, where they were completely outmatched for the entire first half and partly into the second half, and then just sputter off a fourth quarter comeback that they win the game 110-107. That was last Sunday. But then you go into 3 matchups against Indiana, who's, of course, one of the worst teams, if not the worst team in basketball this season. Then you have the Brooklyn Nets, and they escaped that one. That one was on Friday, and let's talk about that game as the Knicks went on the road to Brooklyn. Of course, it's not truly on the road because it is in Brooklyn, close by. The fans were out in for this Knicks team, and they were out in a massive category, of course, with the Nets struggling as well so far this season. But the Knicks pull out the victory 93-92, and truly what was a horrible game by the New York Knicks. They only shot 41% from the field, 28% from beyond the arc. They could not shoot free throws well, 72% from the free throw line. There was a huge free throw disparity in this game. The Knicks shot 32 free throws to just 10 for the Brooklyn Nets. The biggest category that stands out, though, is the turnovers. 22 turnovers in the game, and the Knicks still win it by 1, and it came down to the last couple of possessions. The Knicks could not hit free throws at all. Jalen Brunson misses a free throw. Then you have Karl-Anthony Towns going to the line to try and make it a 3-point game, and he ends up missing both free throws, giving Brooklyn a chance at the end to win it. Of course, Brooklyn has their own problems and kind of messed it up in the end. But really, when you look at it, the New York Knicks did not play well enough to win this game, and they somehow won the game in the end. So that's all that matters. It counts only as a win in the win column. And really, when you look at the Knicks overall, it is a little bit worrying because they were going up against such a horrible team in the Brooklyn Nets, who have been so bad so far this year. They end up squeaking out a win. But it's not the 6-game winning streak with a lot of flair that you're kind of looking at for this Knicks team. They end up getting another win on Sunday night. That was last night, and it was a complete blowout, of course, against another bottom feeder type of team in the Washington Wizards. They were horrible so far this season. They have been horrible, and they continue that in this one. The Knicks had 145 points as they win by 32, 145 to 113. The final, again, 6th straight win for the New York Knicks, but the 16th straight loss for the Washington Wizards. And of course, Karl-Anthony Towns stepped up in this one, had a great game, just like he did for the most part in that Brooklyn game. He ends up getting 26 points along with 16 rebounds in the game, but shot the ball very well. 9 of 13 from the field, 7 of 7 from the free throw line. That's exactly what the Knicks needed. A complete blowout, and that's an easy victory for the New York Knicks. But it does not get really easy. I think when you look at the Knicks' rest of this schedule, they got a couple of games coming up where Charlotte's been red hot, of course. You have OKC on the road. You have Houston on the road. So you really have to win these types of games that are, you should breeze through them every single time. Of course, not every game is just straightforward in the NBA. It's not a cakewalk, but the Knicks have to win these games, and they have another matchup that they should win. It takes place tomorrow. It's a 7:30 start, at Madison Square Garden as they welcome the struggling New Orleans Pelicans, who are 25-47 on the year. Knicks 47-25, quite the opposite. And New Orleans, not an easy team to go up against. They rattled off 3 straight wins just this past week with Dallas and a back-to-back against the Los Angeles Clippers. They end up getting the loss in a home game against the Cleveland Cavaliers a couple of days ago. That was on Saturday. The Knicks are feeling good, 6 straight wins. Just keep it rolling, and they're on their home floor where they have been electric so far this year. 26-9 record. That's near the top of the NBA in terms of home records, and the Knicks need to continue that, and we'll see what happens. They have a couple of guys that are game-time decisions, and Kevin McCullough, who's probably not a mainstay in the rotation, but of course Landry Shamet sort of is, and he's a guy who can come in and give the Knicks some points off the bench. He's a game-time decision with a knee issue right now, so we'll see what happens, but make sure you tune in tomorrow night as the Knicks host the New Orleans Pelicans at Madison Square Garden. Let's finish things off today in the world of hockey as the New York Islanders get their biggest win of the season by far. They end up taking down the Columbus Blue Jackets on Sunday night at UBS Arena, a 1-0 Islanders win, and Columbus, who they are fighting tooth and nail with for that 3rd Metropolitan Division spot in the playoff picture, as well as the 2nd wild card spot right now in the Eastern Conference. It cannot be understated how massive a win that is for the Isles. They end up getting the goal from Bo Horvat just a minute and 25 seconds into the game. He beats Jet Greaves with a snapshot, and it was the earliest goal in Islanders history in terms of a 1-0 win. Earliest goal, just a minute and 25 seconds. That's all it took. And it's a great win for the Isles, who end up snapping a 2-game skid. It was not an easy time for the Islanders after they lost a couple of games to the Montreal Canadiens a couple of nights ago, and then a couple nights before that to the Ottawa Senators. 2 teams also fighting against them in the wild card picture in the East. They end up getting the win, though, against the Blue Jackets, and I think that one was the most important one as you look at Columbus and that battle in the Metropolitan Division. So Columbus still sits in 3rd place right now because they have 1 game fewer played than the New York Islanders, who have 71 games played, 85 points on the season. It is going to come down to the wire, and the Islanders do not have an easy stretch of games. When you look at the rest of this season, some of the top teams in hockey they got to go up against, including the Dallas Stars, the Pittsburgh Penguins, Buffalo Sabres, Carolina Hurricanes. I mean, you just go down the list of tough games that the Islanders will have to play. The big thing for the Islanders is their last 4 games of the season, something to look out for right now. The last 4 games of the season are on home ice at UBS Arena. So a lot of pressure. They do have the home crowd behind them. If there is any home ice advantage still in the NHL, it should be really standing out in those last 4 games for the Islanders this season. So we'll see what happens with that stretch. But the Islanders get a huge win, a 1-0 win, and the star of the game clearly was Ilya Sorokin, who stepped up big time for the Islanders in this one. A massive, massive game, and he ends up getting the first star of the game. He allowed 6 goals on 32 shots the other day, and he completely stepped up for the Islanders, stood on his head in this one, gets his NHL leading 7th shutout of the season so far, and he did so with 26 saves on the evening. So a huge win for the Islanders. Continue to roll and just continue to rack up victories. That's what the Islanders need to do, and they'll look to do that again. Tomorrow night, they welcome the Chicago Blackhawks, a game that the Islanders should win, especially they are the better team, but we know the Islanders so far this season, they've gone up against some bad teams, especially on home ice, and completely laid an egg against them. So take the pressure from that game against Columbus and now translate that to this game tomorrow night. It should be a great one. 7 o'clock start, and the Islanders clearly favored in this one. Everything you want. They just have to handle business here. do not play to the level of the Chicago Blackhawks. And the Blackhawks have not been great this year. They've been really struggling lately, coming off of back-to-back losses against Colorado and then Nashville in overtime. That was last night. The Islanders have to get a victory here. Make it comfortable and get a huge win on your home ice leading into this tough stretch that they have heading into the NHL playoffs. So we'll see what happens. Make sure you tune in tomorrow night, a 7 o'clock start at UBS Arena as the Islanders host the Chicago Blackhawks out in Elmont. But that will do it for episode 149 of the MudWatch Sports Podcast. Please subscribe below. I've been Zach Malum, but thanks for watching and talk to you all on Friday.